deeply honored to introduce Dr. Mukund Rajan, Chairman ECube Investment Advisors Private Limited and former group brand custodian, TATA Group, and author of the famous book Brand Custodian as the guest of honor for this session. Dr. Mukund Rajan is the chairman of ECube Investment Advisors Private Limited, which focuses on environment, social, and governance issues in India. ECube announced a partnership in 2019 with Quantum Advisors to invest in mid-market space in the Indian public markets. Prior to ECube, Dr. Rajan served for 23 years with the Tata Group, where he held a number of senior executive positions. Dr. Rajan serves as the chairperson of Environment Committee of the Federation of Indian Chambers of Commerce and Industry. He has also served as the chair of the India @75 Council of the Confederation of Indian Industry. In 2007, the World Economic Forum honored Dr. Rajan as a young global leader. Dr. Rajan graduated from the Bachelor of Technology program at the Indian Institute of Technology, Delhi in 1989. He received a Rhodes Scholarship to study at Oxford University, where he completed a master's and doctorate in international relations. His doctoral dissertation titled Global Environment Politics, India and the North-South Politics of Global Environmental Issues was published by Oxford University Press in 1996. His second book, The Brand Custodian, was published by HarperCollins in 2019. We welcome you, sir, and request our director, Dr. Prabhat Pankaj, to extend the green welcome to Dr. Mukund Rajan.
Welcome, sir. And this is part of our green initiative, and under which a tree has been planted in your name in Sundarban. And you can track, this is geotagged tree, so you can track also the development of this tree. Wonderful. So we have been able to contribute about 8,000 plus trees in the last 3 years.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you so much.
We now invite Dr. Mukund Rajan, guest of honor for the session, to address the gathering.
Thank you so much. Real pleasure to be with all of you. And a very good morning to Mr. Sharat Jaipuria, Dr. Prabhat Pankaj, Mr. Tushar Pradhan, all the respected members of the faculty of the Jaipuria Institute, the dear students, and of course, all the esteemed participants in this very important conference. So what I'm really going to do is over the next 20 odd minutes, deliver a talk on the subject titled The New Focus on Climate Responsibility and ESG in Corporate India. We've heard a lot about climate change caused by global warming in the last few minutes, and that's going to be a significant part of my talk today. So really, climate change is one amongst a group of global environmental issues, including ozone depletion, tropical deforestation, and the loss of biodiversity. And what makes each of these issues unique is the fact that no single country on its own can successfully tackle them. The cooperation of all nations is a must to achieve a lasting and beneficial outcome. And this is indeed no different from the situation we faced these past 2 years with the COVID-19 pandemic. Nobody is safe until everybody is safe. The collaboration required to resolve global environmental issues, however, is impacted by a high level of friction between the developed world and the developing countries like India. The developed world has in many ways preempted the space for growth, which developing countries desperately require. Developing countries, to improve their standards of living without repeating the mistakes of the Western development model, demand assistance and compensation from the developed world, including access to new environmentally friendly technologies and concessional finance. And yet the quantum of capital flows from the developed world and the technology support offered to developing countries have thus far proved to be trivial in the scheme of things. Meanwhile, developing countries are also bearing the brunt of the adverse impacts of global environmental issues, particularly climate change. As extreme climatic events become more frequent and cause more damage, and not just physical damage, but also consequential adverse impacts on issues such as gender equality, social justice, and human health, we can expect the discourse over solutions for global environmental challenges to become more contentious and more heated. Unfortunately, time is not on our side. On the challenge of climate change, the science has, in just a span of 6 years, guided us from a target of 2 degrees Celsius global warming set at Paris in 2015 to a much more aggressive 1.5 degrees Celsius warming target. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC, in its latest assessment of the impacts of climate change, suggests that we're slipping badly on the possibility of achieving this revised target. The reasonable carbon space we have for growth is likely to be fully consumed within this decade. And this is why you're hearing increasingly frantic calls for adoption of net zero targets by countries and by businesses. We're seeing the impact of this, for instance, in the European Commission's recent adoption of a proposal for a carbon border adjustment mechanism. Under this mechanism, with a view to leveling the playing field for industries in the European Union, tariffs will be hiked on products being imported into the EU from countries which have not implemented strong carbon emission controls in their markets. We're seeing the impact on the regulatory actions of countries like the United Kingdom, which recently announced that all UK-listed companies must release net zero plans by 2023. It is only a matter of time before other markets follow suit. We're seeing the impact in the higher sustainability standards, which multinational enterprises like Unilever and Nestle, which have declared 2039 and 2050 as their target years for achieving net zero status, and which are among over 5,000 companies globally, which have already announced net zero dates, are demanding from their supply chain participants from India. We're seeing it in the thrust of lenders on reporting of material climate-related risks by businesses in the financial filings. Likewise, the announcement of the Glasgow Financial Alliance for Net Zero, or GFANZ, a global coalition of leading financial institutions with assets of over $130 trillion committed to accelerating the decarbonization of the economy. We're seeing it in the behavior of investment funds, which are demanding greater carbon disclosure and strong mitigation measures. Some have already started decarbonizing their portfolios, like Norges Bank, which manages the Norwegian sovereign wealth. We're seeing it in citizen movements that have evolved around the world, such as the one that persuaded the UK Parliament to declare a climate emergency, or the school strike made famous by Greta Thunberg. Within this dynamic and evolving situation, India, the third largest greenhouse gas producer in the world after China and the United States, has a key role to play. The government is pursuing a twin track. In one track, aligning itself with the other developing countries, it is trying to negotiate the best deal it can secure from the developed countries. There are precedents here from India's experience in successfully negotiating both financial assistance and technology transfer to phase out ozone depleting substances under the Montreal Protocol to address the Antarctic ozone hole. In order to show good faith and earn goodwill, India is also making the right noises. For instance, its commitment announced by Prime Minister Modi at the recent Glasgow Conference of Parties on Climate Change, or COP26, to become net zero by 2070, and its promotion of the One Sun, One World, One Grid initiative under the International Solar Alliance, which India anchors. Parallelly, in another track, the government recognizes that the challenge of climate change brooks no delay in actions to mitigate carbon emissions and to adapt to a warming world. Hence the other pronouncements you heard at Glasgow, including the promise to generate 500 gigawatts of non-fossil fuel-based energy by 2030, with 50% of the energy mix coming from renewables, all while improving the energy efficiency of the economy by 45% over 2005 levels by the same year. These measures, and more to come, are going to lead to a massive transformation of the Indian economy and in corporate India. More on this presently. There are going to be a number of factors that will drive the pace of change. First and foremost, the expectations of communities across our country of the prospective quality of life that their members can enjoy. While the COVID-19 pandemic will be remembered for many things, it'll perhaps be best remembered for the impact it is creating on our expectations from life itself and the quality of life that we all want to have. The COVID lockdowns reminded us about the rich diversity of life that thrives around us. Many of us started paying attention to bird calls in our localities, no longer drowned out by traffic noise. In parts of northern India, I'm told people are excited to see the Himalayan mountain ranges for the first time, with their vision no longer blocked by air pollution. But beyond experiencing the biodiversity around us, COVID also revealed that none of us is an island unto ourselves. The loss of life, particularly during the second wave, was fairly evenly spread across all segments of society. Akin to extreme climatic events, COVID showed us that when nature revolts, there is nowhere to hide, no matter how powerful or wealthy you might be. Work from home taught us to value the basic unit of our society, the family, and what it takes to keep every member of that unit secure, with access to healthcare for sure, but also access to livelihoods and income, education, and food. The migrant labor crisis in 2020 shook our conscience precisely because it denied parts of our society these securities. Our courts, the judiciary, are also now speaking the language of quality of life. Take a look at the Supreme Court's seminal judgment of 2018 on the migration timelines from Bharat Stage 4 to Bharat Stage 6 fuel emission norms, which the Indian automobile industry had sought to delay. The Supreme Court held that there could be no compromise with the health of India's citizens, and the larger public interest had to outweigh the much smaller pecuniary interest of the automobile industry. It argued that it is an established principle of law that the right to life, as envisaged in Article 21 of the Constitution of India, includes the right to a decent environment. The right to life not only means leading a life of dignity, but includes within its ambit the right to lead a healthy, robust life in a clean atmosphere, free from smoke and pollution. Ticking off the corporate sector and denying the auto industry the delay it was seeking, the court underlined that the right to live with human dignity becomes illusory in the absence of a healthy environment. In step with these trends, the government is promulgating rules and regulations that enhance the responsibility businesses carry. Beyond a series of sector-specific rules, such as plastic waste management rules and extended producer responsibility rules, it has also designed the national guidelines on responsible business conduct to mainstream the concept of corporate responsibility. These guidelines have subsequently been integrated into the business responsibility and sustainability reports that the Securities and Exchange Board of India, SEBI, has directed the top 1,000 listed companies to publish from this fiscal on a voluntary basis and from the next fiscal on a mandatory basis. Stewardship codes, which emphasize what are known as environment, social, and governance, or ESG requirements, have meanwhile been mandated by SEBI, along with the insurance regulator, IRDAI, and the pension fund regulator, PFRDA, for institutional investors across the mutual fund, insurance, and pension fund sectors in India. There is also close domestic and international scrutiny now taking place in the performance of businesses on the Sustainable Development Goals, or the SDGs, defined by the United Nations, traversing issues ranging from poverty alleviation to addressing climate change. The SDGs have essentially fused the global with the local and created an interest of the international community in the way in which local issues are now being addressed within countries. Customers, meanwhile, especially millennials and those of a younger generation, are increasingly demonstrating a preference to embrace purpose-driven consumer brands that clarify the social commitment. This is the reason a market leader like Unilever resolved last year that each of its 70,000 products would soon carry labels showing their carbon footprint. And recognizing stakeholder expectations of more responsible behavior, investors are pressing for change in the corporate world. Globally, entities now controlling over $120 trillion of invested funds around the world have now subscribed to the United Nations Principles for Responsible Investment, or the UNPRI. These principles require investors to incorporate ESG issues into the investment analysis and decision-making processes. Many of these investors have an India exposure. In a market like the European Union, which offers substantial funding for corporate India, the European Commission has put out regulations that require all asset managers in the Union to disclose the ESG performance of their investment portfolios. We should consequently expect that Indian businesses that are non-compliant on critical ESG issues like climate change will be progressively excluded from the investment portfolios of the largest fund managers in the world. At the same time, the Indian market is also likely to see significant inflows of funds from foreign investors seeking promising ESG stocks that offer good risk-adjusted returns. This last is a trend that has picked up momentum, and there is now a great deal of academic literature to show that a greater focus on ESG typically yields greater resource use efficiency, lower cost of operations, reduced risk, lower cost of borrowing, and greater prospects for valuation re-rating. And this is the reason ESG investing has become the fastest growing asset category in recent quarters. With all of these pressures for change, a new climate of corporate responsibility is being created in India. And forward-looking companies are beginning to respond to this. What are the best ones doing? Well, first and foremost, they accept the need for change. A good example is India's largest private sector company, Reliance Industries, which has acknowledged the climate change issue by setting a target to become net carbon zero by 2035. Next, they put in place the right governance structures to develop and execute sustainability and ESG strategies that are relevant for them, spanning material ESG issues. Increasing numbers of companies like Infosys, Ashok Leyland, and Airtel have created dedicated ESG committees of the board, while others like Tata Steel and NTPC have expanded the remit of the CSR committees to include sustainability. With the tone at the top set, they then focus on raising the capacity of the management team and ensuring strategic alignment across the entire organization. We see a greater focus in forward-looking businesses on resource use efficiency, on attaching a relevant cost to natural resources, including carbon, and embracing circular economy practices that minimize waste and extend life across product life cycles. Through this, they also de-risk as much as possible the volatility often seen in raw material and commodity prices. They prioritize better design to assist product reuse and repair and recycling of waste. They also recognize that many climate-friendly initiatives are no-regrets measures. So investments in renewable energy or energy efficiency improvement, for instance, a great example is the shift to more energy-efficient lighting solutions with LED bulbs, have high returns on investment and can pay for themselves quite swiftly. Indeed, forward-looking companies are constantly trying new things, innovating and pivoting their business models to find competitive advantage. Thus, when Tata Power found itself at the receiving end of portfolio decarbonization initiatives by major investors, it chose to pivot towards renewable energy and away from coal-fired thermal power. The same company is also now trying to build non-traditional collaborations, stimulating the green energy market in India by offering green power to subscribers who are willing to pay not a lower, but a higher price per unit of electricity. R&D has actually traditionally been an area of weakness for Indian businesses. India's R&D spends at around 0.7% of the GDP are far lower than China at over 3 times that percentage, and that too on a far higher GDP base, not to mention developed markets like the United States, Japan, and Germany. However, we may be seeing the beginnings of change, and as Mr. Jaipuria was saying, particularly thanks to the efforts of India's large and growing startup community. We are beginning to see a range of innovations and new business opportunities emerging across areas like electric vehicles, EV batteries, high efficiency materials, biomass to energy, more water and energy efficient agricultural techniques, meat alternatives, and carbon credits trading. Forward-looking enterprises also endeavor to improve employee well-being and safety. They understand the importance of enhancing diversity and inclusion within their workforces, given not just the social context in which Indian businesses operate, but also the value this brings in the effort to champion new ideas and collaborative solutions to address challenges. Areas of focus include gender diversity, higher representation of the scheduled caste and scheduled tribe communities, and addressing the needs of the physically challenged. Such enterprises also demonstrate heightened awareness about the responsibilities towards the welfare of local communities and leverage their CSR spending obligations to become neighbors of choice. Some go a step further, like the Tata Group, to champion corporate volunteering by their employees and seek to link their CSR endeavors with volunteering opportunities. This enhances the pride that employees feel in the organization, improves employee engagement levels, and helps to deliver powerful social outcomes which draw from the skill sets that the employees possess. Forward-looking companies recognize that what gets measured gets improved. And so just as companies like Marico are doing, they link performance on critical ESG issues like carbon emission reduction and better water management to senior executive compensation to force the pace of change. Integral to the link with compensation is a strong focus on measurement, tracking performance over time, and making transparent disclosures. Each of these activities is benefited by the ongoing thrust on digitalization. Multiple sustainability reporting frameworks are being used, including the Global Reporting Initiative, or GRI, and Integrated Reporting, or IR. But in the future, a universal framework is expected to emerge after the new International Sustainability Standards Board that was announced at Glasgow at COP26 completes its work. In the meantime, the Business Responsibility and Sustainability Report, mandated by SEBI, or the BRSR, will offer one valuable tool for Indian businesses to communicate their sustainability commitment. In the past, there have been allegations of non-transparency of data and what is called greenwashing. With the guidelines issued for the preparation of the BRSR reports, any gaps or misleading information will be scrutinized intently by a varied set of stakeholders, including regulators, analysts, proxy firms, activists, the media, and others. And you can soon expect both naming and shaming, as well as withdrawal of investments when the gaps are particularly egregious. Indeed, we've already seen the impact that reports of CDP, what used to be called the Carbon Disclosure Project, have had on the carbon emissions reporting by India's largest corporates. And there has been considerable improvement after some of the initial naming and shaming in the CDP reports. I spent over 2 decades, as you heard, in the Tata Group, established by a nationalist and true visionary, Jamsetji Tata. His business philosophy is captured in this quote attributed to him, and I quote, "In a free enterprise, the community is not just another stakeholder in business, but the very purpose of its existence," unquote. This philosophy has served the Tata Group well for over 150 years, during which time it has become India's largest corporate house, and it continues to inform the mission of the Tata Group to improve the quality of life of the communities we serve through long-term stakeholder value creation based on leadership with trust. Ultimately, when you think about the issues I've touched upon today, it will be this kind of commitment to inclusive and sustainable growth that will secure business success in the future. I'm going to end on that note and extend my very special good wishes to all the students, particularly attending this conference, for their success in the new India that we're all building together. Thank you very much and have a terrific rest of this conference. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for sharing your profound thoughts on highlighting the contribution of sustainable initiatives